Alright, in this video we're going to work with AppLab and create a menu system for our code. So I'm going to walk you through using AppLab. So the first thing you should do is log into your code.org account, click on Create. So I'm going to kind of go over to my code.org window over here, and we're going to click on Create. We're going to go down to AppLab, and then we're going to find ourselves in a new project here. Go ahead and call this, rename it, and call it Activity 4.13, and go ahead and click on Save. All right, now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use some starter code. So go ahead and click on that link over there, and go ahead and open it. So I'm going to paste that link code over here. And as you can see, this is our starter code. Now the easy way to grab the starter code is just go over here and click on copy. Over here, click on copy. It gives a message called copied. And then go into your workspace here and go ahead and paste your code. Now, I'm going to point out a couple things here. Go ahead and run your code. So just go ahead and click on run. And it'll say, what's your choice? And I'll put in E1 for now. Kind of talk about what this all is in a second. And then it prompts you for what's your name. And I'll put in Mr. Chang right over there, and I'll click on OK. So a couple things here that I'll point out, just like we've used the debug console before for our output. This first part here was our menu. So it printed out Activity 4.3. It said menu, then it said example 1. And then it asked, what is your choice? That was that pop-up window that appeared. And we selected E1. So that's why our program went to our example 1 function. And if you look at our example 1 function down here, this is where it asked us, what is your name? And then we had our console log printing my name, and that's where that is coming from. All right, so a couple things I'll note here is that currently, if you notice, your workspace screen is kind of grayed out, and that's because your program is actually still running. So what you want to do here is click on Reset, and the reason for that is because if you edit your code while it's still running, it's actually still running the previous version of your code and not necessarily anything that you've updated. So again, when you're ready to edit your code, make sure that you click on Reset. All right, next up, tap on the left-hand side of the toolbox. We won't be using toolbox going forward, so this will give you a little bit more space on your screen to do some coding here. All right, some other things I'll kind of note is over here are the debug commands. So let's say you're kind of like running your code, and let's say you wanted to kind of like pause it. You could click on, I'm just going to do that over there. You could actually click on break, and again, that pauses your code. In addition, you can also, I'm just going to click on reset here. If you tap on a line number, kind of like that, I just did 8, just to demonstrate this. This is creating a break on this particular line of code. This little icon here is kind of like the pause icon there. So in other words, when your code is running, it'll actually stop right at that point there. So sometimes that might come in handy. Otherwise, again, if you're just kind of like running your code, you could always click on break, and again, it'll kind of like stop your code right at that moment. All right, so other things to note, as I've said before, going forward, do not use block mode. If you submit code in block mode, you will not receive credit for it. And I will not answer any questions regarding how to code in block mode. And so this is because I'm trying to simplify the way that we are coding going forward. And so that's why we won't be using block mode anymore. In addition, we also won't be using design mode anymore. And this is because you can't use on events as part of your student-generated function code. And again, it actually kind of like doubles the size of your programs, so I don't think it's worthwhile. So we're going to not use design mode going forward. And in addition, you're not allowed to use global variables. These are variables declared outside of functions. And again, that's because inside of the AP exam, you have to pass in information via parameters, which we'll get to later in this course here. So some things to kind of keep in mind here. This is where we're kind of heading in our course with our performance task. So we'll kind of get there. Currently, we've done input, we've done output. We haven't done lists yet. We'll get there. We have used algorithms using selection. That's our kind of conditional if statements. And we've used functions, but we haven't done functions with parameters just yet. Again, we'll get there soon. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the starter code here. So first off, let's go ahead and add your name and period. So I'm going to add my name here. My name's Mr. Chang. And my period number is, I teach from 2 to 8, I guess. All right. Sounds good to me. All right. Next up here, let's talk about the main function. So this main function over here, I'll just kind of circle it for now. Your main function is where you're going to edit your code for adding menu items. So here's kind of like your menu over here. And this is where you're going to make choices, which then call the functions. Okay. So currently, again, the way the program works is we got our prompt. That's that pop-up window that appears. And when the user selects E1, then that example1 goes to our example1 function right over there. So that's how our main function works. So we're going to be adding code kind of like right below the if E1 underneath example1. We're going to add some code underneath that, and I'll show you that in a second here. So I just want to note the flow of execution, which I just kind of drew out for you. Again, in your JavaScript code, the compiler looks at the code, goes top down, goes down to your main menu, which is right down here, that call to main. When the program executes the call to main, it goes back up to the main function right up here. When you select your example1 function, it jumps to where you've written your example1 function right over here. So that's called flow of execution. You've seen this before on your Unit 3 exam, for example, and you'll see that in your Unit 4 example too. So declaring variables at the start of your functions. So when you're creating a new variable, this is the way I want you to do it. Just say var space and the variable name. Make sure you put that at the very top of your function that you write. That'll make it very clear where your variables are and where you're declaring it. So now let's go ahead and add another function named example2. So what we're going to do is that we're going to go to the end of the last curly brace and then press enter. So let's go over to our code here again. And so this is the ending curly brace. I just want to point out here, when you tap on this curly brace, you'll notice that this curly brace kind of like has a little square in it. And that's because it's trying to match it up for you so that you know where you are in your code. So we're going to go ahead here and have our else if, and again, we're going to add another choice. So we'll say choice equal E2, and now we'll add another open curly. We'll press enter. Notice when we have this open curly here, it added that end curly there for us, and that's a feature with AppLab. Now we're going to make our example2 function call like that. And currently there's a warning over here, and that's just because we haven't written our example2 code just yet. So we'll get there in a second. All right, other things I'll note before I write that is that you'll notice these vertical kind of like grayed outlines there. That's to kind of help you try to line up your code. Again, this is a style And this is to make your code more readable. So do try to line up your code appropriately. And we'll kind of talk through this. Please make sure that your code is indented in a logical way. And please follow my examples on good looking style code. All right, so now we're going to add our new function called example2, and we're going to put that underneath example1. So let's take a look at our code over here. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. So notice I skipped a little bit of space between our main function and our example2. So here we're going to say function example2, open close parenthesis. Again, I'm going to put my open curly here. When I press enter, notice again it added my close curly there. And let's look at our problem that we're going to write. So by the way, just to note here, in JavaScript, a conditional statement evaluates to true or false. In addition, a conditional statement uses relational operators to compare two values. So those over here, again, relational operators, greater than, less than, equal is actually equal, equal, and not equal is exclamation point and equal. All right, so we're going to ask the user for two numbers using prompt num, and we'll use the variables num1 and num2. So over here, let's go ahead and create those variables. So we'll say num1, we'll say var num2, and again, we'll use our prompt num, so we'll say num1 equal prompt num, and we'll say number1, and then we'll say, oops, I have a semicolon, we'll say num2 equal prompt num number2, okay, and let's see what we're going for here. Oops, I was writing out the code, I didn't switch the screen here. So again, I have var num1, then I have var num2, then I've got num1 equal prompt num number1, and I've got num2 equal prompt num number2, okay. So again, let's kind of look at what we're going for here. So the question asks, determine which number is larger or if they are equal to each other. Okay, so which number is larger or if they're equal to each other. So let's just kind of do this in a simple way here. We'll just say something like if our conditional, which is like num2, greater than num1. Again, we have our open curly here. And here we'll just say console.log, and we'll say num2 is greater than num1. And we'll say semicolon over there. Okay. Now, next up here, we'll just say another else if. We'll just take care if they're equal or not. This isn't necessarily the best solution here, but I think it'll be okay. Oops. Let me do this again, because I was typing and I didn't switch screens here. So let's try this again. So if num2 greater than num1, open curly, console.log, num2 is greater than num1. Okay. Now next up here, then we'll say else if. We'll say if they're equal to each other. So num2 equal num1. Again, open curly, enter, console.log. Num2 is equal to num1. Now, this isn't necessarily the best solution here, just because it doesn't take into account if number1 is greater than num2, but that's okay for now. We're still getting there. So go ahead and click on run. And it says, what's your choice? Here we'll put in E2. So we'll click OK. Again, I'm just going to give like 20 and 10, because I know that 20 is greater than 10. Wait, let me try this one more time. Sorry, E2, and number1 I'll say 10, then I'll give 20. So again, num2 is greater than num1. Again, this isn't necessarily the best code just because it doesn't take into account if num1 is greater than num2. Let's just try this one more time. Let's see if they're the same. So I'll put 100 and 100, and you see the output over here is num2 is equal to num1. All right. I hope that helps. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me.